You're good? All right, we were going to call together a special council meeting on Tuesday, December 19th of 2023. Go ahead and call the roll.
Mayor Don Barnard. John Merriman.
Here.
Sharon Hendren.
Here.
Charlie Campbell.
Here.
Nicole Shep.
Here.
Bob Orsini.
Here.
Brian Green.
Here.
We will stand, and Ms. Sharon Henry is going to do an invocation for us.
Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the season. Let us remember what this is all about. It's to praise you, not to buying gifts. We thank you for all the veterans, all those who have gone before us, and please be with those who are alone at the Christmas season. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Let's move on to citizen comments on matters not on the agenda. There's a lot of you out there, so don't run up there. Good? All right. We have no tabled legislation, so we'll move on to public hearings of legislations.
John, I'm saying this quote, and I can't hear you.
Oh, you want me to talk real loud? Okay, we're gonna move on. So we have ordinance 25-2023, an ordinance amending sections 191.012B.
Wait a minute.
20.
Oh, I skipped one. I didn't see your tab. Okay, 24-2023.
I'll give you my glasses.
I don't have mine on. I do actually wear them. An ordinance approving expenses and other expenditures of the city of Johnstown, Licking County, state of Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2024 and ending December 31st, 2024. Do you want to take it, Dave? Or do you want to take it, Sean?
I'm going to kick this one over to Dave.
Yes, actually, we've been meeting with the Finance Committee for the last few weeks, and we put together a budget. Obviously, we have, in the general fund was the one, I'm just going to recap a couple of items. General fund, we are carrying over a balance of $970,000, but that is showing a deficit for almost $90,000. So we'll be using some carryover for that. And we'll be reviewing this budget through the year, first quarter, second quarter, to see where we're at as far as revenues, how they're streaming and everything. So as far as the other funds, as you can see, if there's any specific questions, we kind of beat this up pretty good and did, I think, a pretty good budget that we're presenting. If there's questions, I can answer anything.
Anyone have questions?
I do. In community environment, you have contractual services of 166. I didn't find the breakout of that.
It's in
What page are you on?
I'm on page 1 of 7, or page 4 of 28, excuse me. Perfect. There we go.
You mentioned community environment?
Yeah, community environment, it says zoning department, you got contractual service, 166,850. And I didn't find a breakout of that.
That had, I know there was architecture in there, architect, and then there was also some zoning contracts with that too.
Can you, okay, what kind of zoning contracts do we have?
And we'll defer that with Sean.
It's MKS.
Later,
here.
come
The
out.
MKSK in there?
Is that MKSK and all that?
Okay.
A little bit,
Okay.
putting together a more detailed list, but I want to make sure I get you
And
the.
any of the lawyers or anything that we use for that kind of stuff, they are in there too?
For that part of the
Attorneys,
business,
yes.
We went through all these item by item. but,
I'm sure you did, but I'd like to know it too.
Sean's going to be able to give you
Good.
some tighter details.
All right. So just I'm going to capture the big pieces. There's some small pieces right around $3,850 that maybe $6,850 that I won't capture, but the legal fees for Frost Brown Todd for Thad Boggs, typically our legal representation that attends the meetings during the planning and zoning meeting, And he's also been vital in sometimes the PD district applications that come through, having his legal counsel here. So there's $36,000 broken out for his legal
He does-
services
He does design review board too,
Yeah.
if needed.
if needed.
He does.
Engineering services, we have broken out $40,000, so that's part of EMH&T. Part of what EMH&T folds into the planning services that MKSK also does. So whenever you have some thoroughfare plans and things like that, you need to have some engineering to stand behind some of those planning services. Sometimes the planner is more broad. EMH&T from that engineering perspective brings it down to a little bit more detailed. We also have $84,000 in there. That's a conglomeration, but the biggest piece of that is going to be the MKSK planner piece.
Okay.
So right now, we don't have an in-house planner. So we've appropriated some costs to continue to have MKSK serve as our planner. We typically task them with some of the bigger projects. Some of the smaller ones I try to keep in-house just to save costs, but there's some larger projects that are actually in the hopper right now that Trevor is working on and guiding the applicant without too much hand-holding, but guiding the applicant when they submit some of the deficiencies that exist, and then instructing them what they need to do to make that application full. And then they'll also be providing probably some staff reports along the way, or pointing out some deficiencies from a point of view that they could ask for a variance, or they could redo their application. So,
Okay, that's good. I appreciate that. It's
Sure.
just wondering what it was, that's all.
okay, that's the broad view. I can
Yeah.
even break it down a little bit further from there, but if you're satisfied with that, I can
Broad
go
view's
back from
good.
there. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So the one thing I will ask, so going into this with the deficit, and I know that in the carryover, there's some money to pull out of there. This question's for Dave as well as anyone on the finance committee. How do you feel about going into the year with a deficit? And how do you feel that we can change things around as we go through based on our needs?
I actually feel comfortable with that. I mean, as far as we were fairly conservative on income tax, and obviously later if the income tax passes, then this will regenerate a whole different scenario also. So hopefully that could assist. With the carryover, I think as far as that's pretty good as far as the carryover. And also, we're looking at transferring some of that into stabilization to start that. That answers.
I could jump in as well,
Yeah.
if you'd like. So, general fund, I think the largest deficit we had during the budgeting process, when it first came out, was right around 500,000. That was taking kind of a collective approach of each department, looking at needs that they had along the lines, and baking those into a budget that would be ideal, not getting everything you want, but be ideal. And so realizing that was a tremendous deficit, took it back to the directors. Directors did a tremendous job of looking at all the items that they could basically still utilize to function. And I think that's where we're at. We're just functioning at this point. Chief did a great job. Jack did a great job. Administratively, we all collaborated together. There was some giving and taking along the way. One of the items I wanted to point out, that the Finance Committee made a recommendation out of their committee. There was a little bit of miscommunication at the end, so this exact budget is not a direct reflection. There are some minor edits that I want to bring to your attention after some clarification with some council members as well as some committee. After that, there was another officer put in at the last piece of that. We've taken that extra officer out so that we will not be adding an additional officer currently, as well as there was a position for an assistant finance director that would also double as a backup for Teresa, as well as Shelley, in doing some administrative things, so that way they could take some of those loads off of those three individuals. So that was something that we feel like we really need, but obviously the budget doesn't allow for that. So we were able to pull that back out. The planner was one of the ones that was discussed extensively. Committee felt that was something that was imperative. for us to be successful with some of the things that are coming down the road as far as the 400 acres. So not being able to do without that, that was one item that had to be really placed back into the budget. That one did go through committee and was a recommendation. The two pieces that were pulled out after that committee meeting were the additional officer as well as the additional assistant finance director. Another piece for clarification and correction, one small edit was the village manager position. That was coded in there at 89. It's reflective now, the 100, 104 salary. Dave, was there any other provisions? We caught a couple along the way, mostly minor, but I do want to bring them to your attention anytime there is any kind of edits that come out after a committee has done a suggestion, just so you're aware of those minor changes.
Didn't you hit me?
Okay, so those were the pieces. Do I love the fact that we have a deficit? Absolutely not. Do I love the fact that we're still operating on a skeleton crew? Absolutely not. Our street department is at a staff of 3 to 4. It's down from what it was before, so they're doing the best they can. Police department, we're still at 9 collectively as a whole, and that's including the chief. We were at a higher staff before, so water and sewer operating, we're holding the line there. So it's not something that I think you all are going to be able to do all the things you want to do, but it's something that we can at least do the best we can with the resources that we've been given. So that's the plug that I'll make. The water operating and the sewer operating are the other ones that are in a deficiency. We're going to continue to try to do our best there. Operating costs have went up, plant chemicals along the way, so we're trying to absorb some of those into those particular items. So hopefully we'll have additional revenues in both those categories to reassess halfway through the year where we're at, and hopefully we can point to not a deficiency moving forward. So just things we're going to have to continue to watch and monitor. But other than that, I think that was it. The only provision that I have, the vehicles are actually in the budget, and that was talked about in the committee meeting. So we've looked at how much it costs to replace these on an annual basis. So that is still in the budget. Only provision that I would recommend to council, pass the budget conditional upon any vehicle purchases prior to vehicles being purchased, that it first obtain approval from the city manager. And that's just to allow us to kind of get a hold on what vehicles we're looking to purchase, what current inventory. This would be with Jack or Chief or any of the departments associated with that. And there's also been some other discussions, so I just want to make sure we nail that down a little bit tighter before we do pull the trigger on some of those departments and the vehicles. A lot of it has to do with just the sensitivity of how thin we're running on some of the budget items. So other than that, that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
So it looks like this will be a year where we are gonna pass a budget, but as long as it goes through, but this is probably gonna be one of those years we have to be creative as we go. It sounds like, depending on what revenue streams come in and
This was
And what materializes.
as creative as we could get and put together something that was reasonable and functional. The vehicles are getting older. I would assume it's going to be whichever one breaks down is the one that gets replaced. There is not a lot of margin for error, so fingers crossed. Revenues increase or expenses curtail. But if everything holds as is, I think this is a solid prediction of where we'll end up.
All right. Everybody good? Citizen comments?
You want your comment?
Yeah, you want?
Are the numbers the same that you had, I guess, the last public council meeting? In other words, is the budget still at $9,580,000?
That's
The
appropriation.
appropriations?
Yes.
9,598,000 is the current
It
one.
has changed since the last public hearing.
Yes.
The question I have several, but a couple of them is the increase in contracts, zoning contracts going up 107,000, administration contracts going up 220,000. Just in that appropriation, there's $300,000 in contracts and 2 general funds. There's nothing in, I don't find any justification legally as far as council passing resolutions or ordinances authorizing these expenditures other than putting in a budget. What are they for?
Well, these are, the numbers are appropriated, they're not spent.
That's correct, but
So as far as resolutions and ordinances, that would come,
but when you appropriate them, you're authorizing the finance director to pay out to that value.
correct.
Why? What contract does zoning have for $307,000? Now, don't point at me.
I think, well, I think,
want to know from
I
council.
think Sean went through those. When
Pardon me?
Sean went through those when Charlie asked.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't hear. That's why. But those are concerns.
For zoning, you have
66,
166,850, not 300.
yeah.
In what?
Contractual.
That's in your contractual services.
In what fund?
And community environment, which would be zoning.
I'm talking zoning.
That is
But we're
zoning.
talking about zoning.
Zoning, that's what they have it under.
Okay, and what's the contract in zoning?
166,850.
Okay, that's going up more, all right? The last package I had, it was going to 307,000. That's why I was asking, yes, the budget numbers, the same ones we
They're
saw.
not.
They're not.
I-
Question I have, and I guess they would have to answer this, and that is water debt. How did it go up $130,000? The water debt, the payments of bonds we have outstanding, and how did it go up $130,000? I didn't know you borrowed any more money.
I'll take that one.
You gotta talk real loud.
The, as far as, we had a OWDA loan that we actually, is that too loud?
Yeah, you can talk real loud.
Oh,
That louder.
we had a OWDA loan that we ended up exercising of like 1.4 million that was past bonds and stuff that actually we ended up for the water expansion. And that's where that number's coming from, I'm sure.
That's not the same as the 1.4 million that you added to the water enterprise.
That's the amount that we ended up,
In two funds though?
we appropriated that money in there to pay for the service, and then we have to pay the debt out of the water debt service.
Okay.
And it's still in your budget though, it's in there twice yet.
No, it's not.
Well, that $1.4 million also shows up in water enterprise.
No, it's not in there.
And that was the amendment of ordinance 11-2023.
Right, that was the money that we ended up appropriating, that we already had borrowed, but we didn't use the funds.
used it.
We used the funds in '23, now we have to pay the debt in '24.
I understand that, but how do you show its income in one fund and paying out of a different? Shouldn't there be a movement of that then to the water debt fund to pay it out?
The debt that we pay for water, sewer, and our general debt capacity is transferred out of our general fund based on the 28%. And also, there's for water and sewer services, there's a piece that goes into the debt service for water and sewer also.
You'll know I'll talk about this offline, because I don't comprehend how it can be two places at once.
We'd be welcome to answer any questions you may have prior or after council. If you want staff to sit down, I just don't want to.
He's good. Good, Louis?
For now,
Okay. Anybody else?
but just a general comment. This is December the 19th. It's an ordinance. goes into effect 30 days after passage. How you gonna pay the bill from January 1 to January 18th?
It's an appropriation. Is it an appropriation?
Appropriations start January 18th if you pass it tonight.
Appropriations sometimes happen immediately.
I'm sorry.
Appropriation ordinances are effective immediately.
Ap-
Upon passage.
Appropriation ordinances are effective immediately. So they're effective.
But legislation doesn't pass, so.
Well, appropriations are-
Authorized expenditure to pass
If you pass the appropriation, it is. Those are, yes, it is.
30 days after you pass it.
Not appropriation. The appropriation starts immediately.
Now, I'm saying question on ordinance 25, where you're appropriating additional funds for this year.
Okay, so we're good. Anybody else? All right. We're gonna close public comment. Does anybody have anything they want to say after? No. So first we'll have to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Not on this.
No, that's the next one, right? You're right. So for this one, I can make it. Anybody else can make it. You want to make it, Bobs?
I just want to make sure I get Sean's
You want to get the vehicle?
clarification in there.
Yep, just a recommendation from me. You can
I think it's good.
choose however you want. My only recommendation would be for, if you do pass the budget, that a condition be given that any expenditures for a car, purchases of a car would first be approved by the city manager. It's just to collectively have a better discussion and an understanding before we react to that.
I'm working it out. All right. I'm going to make a motion to pass ordinance 24-2023, conditional, as written, with the condition that any expenditure for a motor vehicle be approved by the village city manager prior to purchase.
I have a question. I
Oh,
don't
oh,
understand.
You
There's a
can't,
there's a
Charlie.
vote.
Oh, a
There's a,
Yeah, this is,
I'll second.
There we go. Now we can talk. Right.
Now we
no,
vote.
we got to vote.
No discussion?
No, that's what it was before.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Charlie Campbell,
Yeah.
Nicole Shook,
Yes.
Bob Orsini,
yes.
Ron Merriman,
Yes.
Ryan Green,
Yes.
Sharon Hendrick.
Yes.
All right, now we'll move on to ordinance 25-2023. An ordinance amending the sections 191.02 through 191.07 of the codified ordinance of the city of Johnstown to increase the income tax rate to 2% with a 75% credit. You want to take it? Or you want Dave to take it?
Sure, I can take it, and then I'll probably kick it back to your finance committee since this was discussed there. So, and if you want to start off, Bob, you can, or I can kind of give an introduction and then you can take it away, or however you want to proceed.
You frame it, I'll fill it in.
Great. So in finance committee, there was a discussion, obviously working through the budget this year, realizing that, again, we're kind of operating in a skeleton situation. The need did not go away. So we wanted to give the voters an opportunity to reevaluate our tax structure. And so the committee came out of that discussion with a 2%, with a 75% credit to be put on the ballot in March, and still try to communicate and message the best we can to the residents, and address some of the concerns that we heard in the last election, where I think being more specific with some of the items that the money would be utilized on. And to be fair, I think with 4 new council members, that was some of the challenges that were facing the current council, knowing there would be 4 new council members, not wanting to be able to speak for them specifically, because a lot can change, obviously, in a 6 months' time as to what those funds may be spent on. So that is really loud. Okay.
It works, Bob.
It's
It's working.
It works.
It works. So, completely lost on all concentration at this point, but we'll recapture. So, wanting to have the opportunity to take this to the voters in March, like I said, continue the message, continue to try to answer questions, maybe to be more specific on what some of the monies would be strategically utilized for, was some of the concerns that were discussed during that particular topic. And I'll leave the rest for Bob.
Right. In the Finance Committee, we went through the budget line by line, looked for any opportunity to capture savings. Appropriations were discussed in detail, being specific about need and available funds. Projecting out, the current income to expense ratio is not strong enough to keep us in a strong position as a city. We could operate for several more years with carryover. But as you've just seen, as your carryover, as your income to debt ratio changes, you get downgraded by Moody's. Every time that happens, all our money gets more expensive. You put all that in a pot and you start looking at down the road, we are 4 to 5 years away from having major problems. And by that, I mean 4 to 5 years of no major improvements, just hanging on and operating. That's what the numbers say. So in discussion, to do nothing, I think would be an error on the committee's part. So we discussed it and wanted to bring it back to the voters, hearing their voice, adjusting the amounts, some bringing down the top line, keeping the credit in place. That will allow us to get a better footing and hopefully bridge the gap between need and business coming in to provide those extra dollars that can help back fund some of these operating costs. And that's it. We put it out to the voters and explain our situation to them as best we can. And they'll tell us what to do and we'll act accordingly.
Anyone else?
My only thing on this is, I mean, the voters definitely spoke. They told us what they thought. We're going right into this at probably the worst, most inopportune time of the year to run a campaign like this. A campaign over the winter, you know, you have taxes being paid, you have other things coming in. I won't disagree that we need the money. We just saw the budget, it's tight. We were able to, you know, continue service as the status quo. We were able to add a few additions in there of small roles and things like that. We were able to stay afloat. Now, as Bob said, that may only be for a few years. We'll see what happens with that. I think just from how the voters spoke, rushing into this, I think you kind of cheapen your message. If we're not able to get this passed this time, we just pick other numbers next time in November and throw it on the ballot. I worry about doing that and running headlong into it. I'm not going to say that we need it or we don't need it. It's up to the voters. And I think they spoke. We haven't necessarily gone back to them in any sort of focus group or asking questions. I mean, I know there's not a ton that we can do, but I think the time of the year, I think the message, I think having new council members on to potentially weigh in on it, I just think it's an inopportune time to do it. I wish we didn't have to wait until November, but unfortunately that's the case we're in. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, well, I helped campaign, I went out in the streets, and the two things that everybody brought up was that 2.25 was too high, and I think we've adjusted well for that. I think we're more in line, absolutely. But then the 0.75, they commented about that also. And I think last 2 meetings, and I did mention that maybe why don't we drop down to 0.50? But we didn't, you didn't adjust it. So did you consider going down to 0.50? You were talking about needing money, and that would give us a little bit more money, and I understand that the people who work out of town have to pay a lot more to the city that they work in, because we can't get jobs here in Johnstown, but they have to carry some of the burden too, and we all live here, our families do, and the money should be, here, not necessarily in, the city of Columbus is not going to relinquish. They're going to make it 2.5, you either get it, you don't want to work there, don't work there, but they're going to take the money. But and I see giving the people who work there a little bit of a break. I'm trying to be, again, good neighbors and working with them. But I think 0.75 is too much, and I think it should be 0.5. That's my 2 cents.
I think I'd go along with Charlie, plus I think March is too soon. I agree, most people said it was too much. And we need it, we definitely need it, I won't deny that. And I think March would be very difficult to get people to come out. The people that are going to come out in March are going to be those that are against it. That's my thinking, so. But we do need it, and I agree with Charlie, let's reduce it.
Bob, do you know the difference between the 0.75%?
Specific
and the
dollars, no,
0.5?
it was reviewed, but I can't tell you the
Okay.
specific dollar amounts. I don't have my notes from the meetings.
I'm going to try to give you some context on the 0.75 versus
Before
the
we get too
0.5.
far away from it, I don't disagree with any of your opinions. I think they're all valid. But I operate from what's right is right, timing, all the other things that go around making things pass or not. The community will understand that this tax is necessary to live in the town that we hope we could all grow to be, or they won't. So if you're motivated to see things change, to see your streets get paved, to see, more than a handful of guys driving a plow truck, because when they run out of time, if we get a snowstorm, when they run out of time, we don't have anyone to do it. We've got to have these people hired. We've got to have them in place. Not to be with zero backup if something would happen to an employee, especially critical positions. These are the things that the community has to understand. If they understand that better in November versus March, I don't know. But, from an objective standpoint, it's a necessity. And
I have a question.
it is what it is.
I have actually.
How much money would it, if we pass it exactly as it is right now? And when will it go into effect, since the May election, so when is it going to effect? Immediately, or does it have to wait a certain period of time?
July.
It would go, if it passed, it would go July 1st, and if it was November, it would be the following fiscal year.
As far as the following fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay. Would it
Because
be
it
our
would be that-
fiscal year or January 1 fiscal?
No, January
January
1.
1.
fiscal.
Right.
Can I ask a question? This is to Jack. So Jack, the way the budget stands for 2024, are we going to have less people out there being able to plow our streets for the snow?
Yes.
Okay.
We started, at the beginning of this year, there was a staff of 7 people on the street department. There is now a staff of 3. So with the snow event we had just the other day,
Yeah.
it really wasn't a lot of snow, thank goodness, but there was ice. I got the first call in at 1:26 this morning, so I sent 2 in, held 1 back. But traditionally during a heavy snowstorm, I would send 3 guys in. We'd have 3 trucks running. So what's going to happen is during a heavier snow event, I can't send 3 people in and then have no one. So we're going to do major arteries, 62, 37, Concord, Jersey, Edwards. We're going to do the main thrust that we can get done in the first wave in, and then we have to shut back and do side streets and stuff like that the following day, hoping we don't have an additional
Okay.
snow the following day. And that was able to work with what we did last night. We come in at 1:30, got stuff, particularly the main routes, got them salted down, and then we did finish cleanup this morning. Tim Perry supported in that water plant utility operator, also went down to help support it.
So the longer that we go without additional funding for the city, the worse that's going to get, correct?
Well, like I said, it's going to take more time.
Yep.
And as long as council understands that, it's just a situation where when you go from 7 to 3, it takes more time to cover those amount of streets. But the crew will work diligently to get to it
Absolutely.
as quickly as they can.
And the police department has similar issues. I don't think it's prudent to go into details because of public safety, but their staffing level could be improved, provide a better service for the city and safety for the officers.
If you want me to weigh in on the 0.5 versus the 0.75.
Sure, if you have those notes or the details.
Well, I have some details. I don't have the specifics, but I want to be able to comment to what Charlie was asking. So a 2% with a 0.5% credit was tried, I believe 2016, Bob,
Yes.
and it did not go well. So that particular scenario has been attempted, albeit years ago. That very number had actually been posed to the voters, and that got put down. One of the other reasons that the committee had discussed going to a 0.75 versus a 0.5 is that a 0.75 actually saves more of the residents money. And I think that was a big motivator from this council, is trying to save as many residents as much money as they can by offering the credit, which is customary throughout Central Ohio. I would say, put it this way, a fair amount give 100% credit. A majority at least give some credit. Right now, we give no credit. So going to a 0.5, your savings ratio per constituents would come in close to that 50%. So as far as getting a motivating factor out there for people to go out and vote, from my experience, voters typically don't go out to vote for themselves for a tax increase. And that's effectively what they would be doing, or close to it, with a 50% credit rather than a 75. With a 75% credit, a fair amount of voters, or a majority of the voters, would see an increase in the savings, and a decrease in their taxes, or no change at all. So that was one of the defining factors that was talked about extensively in the committee. I do want to bring up, you mentioned a great point, that new council having the opportunity to weigh in on this. And that was, I believe, one of the hesitations of the original discussions that we had as a council currently, waiting for that new council to weigh in, allowing them to kind of steer the vessel, and possibly putting it on in November. Many of the new council members showed up for the finance committee meetings. And I think they were honestly, and they're here and they can speak on this, were some of the driving force to actually get this rediscussed at that committee meeting, and actually have that committee meeting give the recommendation to this council to put it on for March. So if you're looking for some direction from the new council members, they were there, and I would say if they were not there, the finance committee never would have made the recommendation.
We
and
wouldn't have picked it up.
we wouldn't be in the situation we're at. So this was a collaborative discussion that was worked on with those new incoming council members, not only to put it on the March ballot, but identifying the number and the rate and the structure of that particular ballot issue. So whatever that's worth, like I said, they're here. Some of them are here. I don't want to put any of them on the spot, but you can ask questions. They can not answer if they so choose, but I want to give you feedback. Appreciate the concern. And that's, I don't have the specific numbers. Dave, if you can remember them, I'm going to throw out some generalities. The difference between 0.5 and 0.75 was not overly significant, but I think when it looked at how many voters were going to be negatively impacted with a 0.5 versus a 0.75, it obviously led them heavier towards the 0.75, knowing that more residents would save additional funds if it was at the 0.75. So I'm here to answer any other questions.
Question for you. When we had the 0.5 credit before, and then it went to, we took it away, and went to 1%, which I was definitely in favor of, and I helped, Carol Van Dies was on the board, and I really pushed hard for that to happen. I thought it was the best for the city, or the village at the time. But I forget how that occurred. What I mean is, was it a public vote, or did just city council say, okay, as of today, we take it away?
It's a great question, and I actually love the fact that you ask it, because this is a great opportunity to clarify. Bob, if you want to take it, you can. If not, I'll jump in.
So that credit was issued from council. It was not part of the ordinance for taxation. So in this language here, which is why it was specifically written in, it's written into the legislation. Anything put in place by the people can only be
Has to be
removed
removed by the people.
Council does not have the authority to adjust, delete, change in any way anything that is written into that ordinance.
Without the people's approval?
We would have to go back
Yes.
to vote. So yes, the 0.75 credit would be permanent, whereas the 50% credit or the 0.5% credit was issued by council and therefore could be removed by council.
Okay.
That's a
I
great,
didn't know that. That's
great
good.
clarifier.
I think we were on council at the time. I think there was a lot of discussion.
We were on council at the time, and that's a state of Ohio situation. All municipalities and villages are allowed to institute that 1%. It's given to them, the right is given to them by the state of Ohio. And then they can also do credits within there. But they are able to do a 1% at a minimum. But anything over 1%, you then have to go to the voters. So not only are we going to the voters for the increase, but we're also going to the voters for the credit. And to Bob's point, the credit, if it's put in by the voters, cannot be removed by council. It's part of the ballot language, part of the ballot that would be put to the voters, and if it's passed as such, the credit cannot be removed without then going back to the voters again for their approval to remove that credit. So there's no bait and switch tactic that can be employed with this council or the next council or the council 10 years from now until they go to the voters for their approval. So a lot of municipalities have done that. City of Powell just recently did this very same thing. They find that putting it out there in a definitive way that makes the voters have that guarantee on the box, if you will, makes them feel better about the situation, that they have a direct say in the taxation that happens at their local level. So I applaud the fact that that's actually being done now. Before, it wasn't always that way, but I think it's a great way to go about it.
Another question too. When this passes, which it will, okay, positive attitude, you know. But what I look at is, so now we start bringing money in, say July. Is there been any talk on the focus of how that little bit of money that will come in for that year would be spent? And to me, you know, one of the biggest things is I see we're short-staffed, and I would like to think that we would do it. And also, I want to comment now that I didn't get to. I don't understand at all. You're the city manager. If you want to authorize a car, you can. If you don't, I don't understand why we had to vote. That just baffles me. You are the city manager. You control the money. You know when we have it to spend and when we don't. And that's my opinion. Thank you for that. I'll go on.
You're fine. So great question. So I'll answer that one first. So typically, if it's appropriated in an item, the department directors have some latitude within their department to spend the appropriated funds.
I get it.
And they do that for efficiency, so that way Jack, Chief, Dave they don't always have to come to me. If it's already been appropriated, they say, hey, this is in my budget. They've been given the opportunity and the authority to operate their department with the funds that have been appropriated. The car situation and the loan structure in which we're going to do the vehicles is a little bit different. So that's why I want to have a discussion with them first so that we can work through that. We, like I said, this year we're doing it a little bit different than we've done it in the past. And prior to obligating ourselves for anything, I want to walk through that conversation with them, make sure we're looking at the proper financing, make sure we're looking at the proper fleet, proper inventory, proper needs. And it's nothing against the department directors. I think there's a longer conversation that needs to happen. We've appropriated the money. So that's the provision that's in there this year. And hopefully that gives you the explanation that exists there.
You know.
And I can fill in a little bit too there. To be fair, in the finance meetings, we discussed a lot about organizing and departmentalizing, if you will. Whereas they are technically departmentalized, but as we grow, we want to make efforts now for the future when the departments are so large that, you know, there's not going to be an opportunity to discuss things all the time. So we talked a lot about moving the vehicles into individual departments, kind of making them little silos, all still under the city manager, but allowing that structure to be there so when we grow to the point where, if I ask this all the time, is it in your budget? If it's in the budget, and we do a good job appropriating the budget on the front end, then it makes the conversation a lot easier. The department head should have some latitude, but especially when you're restructuring things and looking at it holistically, from a financing standpoint, all this does is remind everyone to communicate. Not that we need it, but for process and order, I think it's a good add.
I understand appropriations, and I understand that part of it, and I agree that, but when you're looking at large purchases, large dollar purchases, I always take a look at where are we really financially? Do we have $50,000 to buy a car? You know, even though we appropriate it, where are we right now in our step process? You know, like, that's all that I question. That's why I think it's imperative that, you know, I know putting it in there was very good, was good for you to do, but I just look at the boss being able to sit there and do things, you know, I mean, I was a fireman, I was a chief, and we did spend money, but I had a boss above me that said, right now, it's not a good time, the city's not appropriating it, even though they put it in appropriations. then that necessarily would pass the money to give it to us. Okay, that's all I'm saying, but
That's a great
we go
question.
on to the next one, but I know we need the money. I know we do.
And I wanted to, oh, I'm sorry.
ahead.
I wanted to answer your question on if the income tax were to pass.
Right.
Charlie's doing the positive
That's where I'm
attitude,
at,
which
yeah.
I love it. So the way this particular language is worded is the collection would start July 1st, Dave, is that correct?
Yes.
July 1st of 2024. So if it were to pass, it wouldn't happen immediately after the ballot, walk out the voter booth that next day. We like to set it up at least whether quarterly or semi-annually. So we went with a semi-annually halfway through the year. We would then start to collect those funds. And that's another piece that was discussed heavily in those finance committee meetings was identifying the areas in which there's deficiencies. I think everyone can agree that there's deficiencies everywhere. And with the additional revenue, it's probably not going to solve all the problems by any means, but the new council, I think, is very well ready to take this approach of looking at it all and defining where they believe the important pieces lay and what they really want to focus on. And they're going to take that message to the voters and say, hey, as your council, this is what we believe we would recommend we would appropriate the money towards. Now, they're obviously going to get a dialogue back from the voters, and that's the beauty of a small government. You get feedback, and then they can tell you, maybe we emphasize here, maybe you emphasize here. So that's going to be their task, but they were very involved with that conversation and identifying exactly what you said. Once we do get the money, and I think before they even get all this done to the voters, they're going to have some agenda items for those voters and say, hey, this is our expectation. If X comes in, we're going to divide it up into these particular parts. So
Thank you. That's good enough.
Anybody else? Citizen comment?
Bob, would you bear with me a moment? I just want to make sure that I understand the 75% credit. So if we have an individual that lives in town and pays, and is employed in town, if we raise it to 2%, they're gonna owe $1,200 in taxes annually. Is that correct? 2% of.
What do they make?
I'm sorry, if they made $60,000 a year,
I don't know if I'm ready for this exercise, but I'll give it a shot.
He's right.
I'll back you up, Bob.
Thank you. I gotta get a calculator out.
Charlie?
You're right.
All right, so they
It's
make
10%.
$60,000. I'm
Yeah,
with you.
if their taxable income is
Yeah,
$60,000.
because he's saying 1%, they're
They pay
6.
1,200.
The 2% tax would bring in $1,200 to the city,
Correct.
all right? Now, if they lived in town, worked elsewhere, and paid the 2.5%, they would pay that other community $1,500, is that correct?
Yep.
75% of the 1,500 is the credit that they could apply or would apply to the 1,200 that they pay, that the tax in Johnstown.
No.
It'd be more than that because
Yeah.
they would pay.
I'm-
It'd be more than that because they'd pay the 2% here and the 2. Like I work in PAL. I pay 2% to PAL, 1% to Johnstown.
Right,
If you raise it, I'm gonna pay 4%, but I'll get a credit of 0.75 of 2%.
if you didn't have the credit, but if you have the 75% credit,
Then I pay 0.75 of 2%.
no.
I get to
You
credit. I get a credit of that,
you
correct?
pay a credit, you get a credit of the $1,500 that would have been what you had paid in that other community.
No,
Just for
no.
clarification,
No, no.
1,500 is
Is that
not
correct?
accurate. 1,500 is
But
not
that's-
accurate.
No, because the credit goes against our tax rate, not whatever else is out
You
there.
still pay. So you would pay the residual, you'd pay the
Okay.
0.25%.
I interpret it as the 75% of their tax from the other community.
No, we
Up
can't,
to
well,
2%.
Up to 2%.
yeah,
Up to 2%.
up to 2%, not the total
So
amount.
the credit would be given on the
What does the
1,200.
2%, or what does the 75%
Right.
apply to?
You need a whiteboard.
1,200.
And this person is $1,200. And the $60,000 income,
Yeah,
It's a max of 2%, they get a 0.75% credit. So your income's gonna change what your 2% number is, and change what your 0.75 number is, but it can't go up out of that metrics.
They would
That's
get,
correct. I mean, it can't go to zero.
Oh, no,
they would get a $900 credit.
Zero.
no,
Yeah.
well, no.
They'd get
I
a
mean,
$900 credit.
The most it can take you is 75% of what you would pay,
Right.
What you would pay,
that you would have paid.
yes.
That's correct.
Okay, so when I look at that, 75% of the $1,200 says we're gonna lose money.
No, absolutely will not lose money.
That's why I'm questioning it, how it's applied.
I can sit down and go through this with you as a sidebar, line by line, we can do different amounts. We plan on bringing this to the community so they better understand how it impacts them, because I think there was some confusion there. But we won't, if you're giving a credit based on an increase, unless you give a credit above the increase, you can't lose money.
That's right.
That's, or, and I.
The finance committee's intention is to bring this out with examples in detail that are followable.
Well, and that's where I think some confusion, but if you're getting them 75% credit from what they pay
No,
in
no.
another community,
It's, the credit we can offer is is limited to 2% of what we would collect. We're giving 0.75 of the 2%,
Potential.
up to.
It depends on where they work and what their tax is. So like if you work in Columbus and
Okay.
what's Hilliard?
it's up to 75, or
So,
75%.
of 2%.
Up to the tax they would have paid.
So like if you worked
To
in
us.
Hilliard, yeah, yes, to us, the 2%. If you worked in Hilliard, you're paying 2.5.
Well, all right, but on this sample, we're just talking about 60,000. They've gotten a 75% credit of $1,200.
So $900.
Be
Yes.
$900. So they would pay
Okay,
300
that's-
plus,
300 less than what they were paying.
applying
Yeah,
the
they'll pay
75%
900
credit.
instead of 12.
To their taxable rate in
Yeah,
another
it is.
municipality, that's right.
Okay,
pay
that's what.
300.
Let me throw a few other curveballs out there. If, a few other things that make this more complex. If you travel for work and go to different municipalities, you only have to pay your employer's tax rate when you visit that county. If you don't go to that county, you can choose to pay your home rate versus paying, so if you work in Columbus, but you travel all over the place, only when you go to Franklin County do you have to pay that as your rate. If you work outside of Franklin County, you do not. Now, consult your tax people, it's very complex. Employees that come to work within our city, they pay the 2% rate when they work here. Construction workers and the like.
Yep.
So 1 to 2% is a 100% increase in the tax rate we capture when they're here, right? They don't get a credit, right? Because they're paying Johnstown only.
Okay.
So
but
there-
it answers the question.
Yeah, there is a lot of different revenue streams that come with this, along with the $300 more that someone pays. Yes.
That's what I didn't understand.
Sure.
That's fair.
Yep. Anybody else? All right. So we will close public comment. Anybody on council have any further discussion? All right, to do this properly, we have to first, I'll make a motion to suspend the rules to hear the ordinance and waive the second reading.
Want to give context?
Context is the deadline to get this on the March ballot is Wednesday by 4 o'clock.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, 4 p.m.
Yeah. Final hour.
So if you want to move forward with this, agree to the waive. If you don't,
So typically it takes 2 readings of council for an ordinance. What you're doing is waiving the reading. Now, we don't have to waive, or we don't have to do it by an emergency,
Right.
because if you did it by emergency, it would go into effect immediately. But this will go to the voters,
Right.
which is going to be past that
Which
30
is the second
days.
part.
So you don't need to do that. Effectively, you're only waiving the second reading of this particular piece of legislation. Is that correct, Teresa?
Correct.
all right.
They need it.
So you
I
made the motion?
Motion.
I'll second the motion to waive the second reading.
Nicole Shook,
Yes.
Bob Orsini.
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes.
Ryan Green.
Yes.
Sharon Hendricks. Charlie Campbell.
Yes.
All right, next, I would like to make a motion to approve ordinance 25-2023, conditional upon the vote of the electorate.
I'll second.
Bob Orsini.
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes.
Ryan Green.
No.
Sharon Hendren.
No.
Charlie Campbell.
No.
Nicole Shook.
Yes.
Fails. 5-0.
Tie vote fails. You guys know that, John. You gotta announce it.
Yeah, a side vote fails. We will move on to ordinance 26-2023. An ordinance amending the ordinance 22-2022, the annual appropriation ordinance of the city of Johnstown to approve necessary changes of the appropriations. We'll kick that to Dave.
Thank you. This is just the cleanup for year end. The transfer in is the income tax percentage of the 28%. That's the $217,000 that we're transferring into the capital fund. And then we had one of our OWDA loans. We're asking for a reappropriation of $10,000. That's our debt service that we were short of $10,000. So the change of this ordinance is the $10,000 for a water debt.
Any questions? Public comment? Closed public comment. For the second time, we'll have to make a motion for this one. I'll make a motion to suspend the rules to hear the ordinance and waive the second reading.
Second?
John Merriman.
Yes.
Ryan Green.
Yes.
Sharon Hendren.
Yes.
Charlie Campbell.
Yes.
Nicole Shook.
Yes.
Bob Orsini.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve as written ordinance amending ordinance 22-2022, the annual appropriation ordinance of the city of Johnstown to approve necessary changes to appropriations.
Did you do public hearing
We did.
on this one? Okay, so I have a motion.
On the table.
John?
I'll second.
Ryan Green.
Yes.
Sharon Hendren.
Yes.
Charlie Campbell.
Yes.
Nicole Shook.
Yes.
Bob Orsini.
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes. And we passed one. We'll move on to resolution 2023-43, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with the Licking County Board of Commissioners for reimbursement of legal counsel for indigent defendants for the city of Johnstown, Licking County, Ohio. You want to take that one, Sean?
It's pretty boilerplate. We have to pass it every year. Just simply states that, well, it's kind of mandated by the county commissioners that you have to do it. So anybody that doesn't have funds, we then have to carry the weight, carry the load. Is that pretty much it, Teresa?
Yeah, the Ohio Public Defender's Office requires annual renewal of indigent contracts to be voted on each year by the municipalities.
Is it true they have to be cremated? They don't have a funeral? Is that true? Cremation's a lot cheaper. I'd heard that.
Well, this is for indigent, like,
These are.
Yeah.
someone who can't afford legal.
Legal counsel.
Legal fees, not burial.
This isn't the
They do-
burial.
We did, so last year, I think we did one of those last year.
We did
though.
one for burial
We
once.
do have.
We did. We have those sometimes.
This is just for
Yeah,
defense.
this is.
Okay, this isn't the burial. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Move on to public comment on that one. Hearing none, we will close public comment. I'll do it again. I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-44 resolution, or -43, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with the Licking County Board of Commissioners for reimbursement of legal counsel for indigent defendants for the city of Johnstown.
I'll second.
Sharon Hendren.
Yes.
Charlie Campbell.
Yes.
Nicole Shook.
Yes.
Bob Orsini.
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes.
Ryan Green.
Yes.
All right, we're on to Resolution 2023-44, a resolution amending the council rules of order. Do you want to take this one, Bob?
I'll make a motion that we table this.
All right, I'll second.
Charlie Campbell.
Yes.
Nicole Shook.
Yes.
Bob Orsini.
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes.
Ryan Green.
Yes.
Karen Hendrick.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, we don't need the last one.
Correct. You can either bring it to a vote and
Yeah, bring it to a vote.
there's
We'll
no
call it.
reason to, you could just let it die. You could table it.
Call to the table, and then if no one puts it
It'll
forward,
die.
it'll.
All right, so let's call for a vote for Resolution 2023-45, which is a resolution providing for the submission to the electors of the city of Johnstown at the primary election to be held on March 19th, 2024, an ordinance to amend sections 191 through 191.7 to increase the city income tax, which we just turned down.
If there's no second, it'll die.
There's hearing no seconds, it'll die on the table. We have no introduction of legislation tonight. Does anyone have any other business? Louis?
On the tax ordinance, section 191, that goes on the ballot when?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It
It
failed.
It
Louis.
failed.
Failed.
It failed.
Too many people talking.
It failed.
Pardon me?
It failed. We didn't approve it.
We didn't approve it, so it won't be.
2%, 75% grant didn't.
It's not gonna be on the
It won't be
ballot.
added to the
Okay,
ballot.
what I wanted to bring up is that the 2.25%, 75 grant is codified. That's law right now. Whether.
No.
No.
No,
Go to your codified ordinance,
I
and
can
it was
fix that.
codified.
I'm going to
So-
defer to Teresa.
If you're going to change 191, that ought to be a repeal of that while you're doing it.
It's,
That ballot initiative failed. The publisher of our ordinances had no way of knowing that, so when they printed the new version, they included it. So Louis is correct, it is showing that way, but it is not correct. I've asked them to fix it.
It's,
So
it's part of the ordinance today.
today it is. If you look
Unless
online, it
someone
says that
goes
it,
Right.
in and changes.
it's not because the ballot failed.
Part of the online
Yeah.
version,
The
but
codified.
but it is not legally binding by the city
It's a
because
typo.
Exactly.
it was conditional upon ballot being approved by the voters, and since it didn't,
That's right.
that is no longer an ordinance that is in effect. But to Teresa's point, we only do this twice a year
Yeah.
because our budget. So unfortunately, whenever you guys pass an ordinance, it does not get put in place until usually, once a year maybe? Twice a year max? Usually 6 months, sometimes 12 months lag time behind whenever you actually do pass the ordinance and it actually gets put on the online version, which is accessible by the public, so.
I
just to
have
clarify.
asked them to correct the online version. When they look at all of our ordinances that pass, they see that it passed, but they don't know that it didn't pass on the ballot. So they went ahead and printed it. So the printed publication at this moment is wrong, but they're fixing it.
all right. Any other business?
I have one other item if nobody else has anything else.
Nope.
Sure? Okay. Going to try to end on a little bit of a happier note or a lighthearted note. So last week, we made big fanfare about Sharon. You will not get the same fanfare because you've not been here for 24 years. But the city did want to give you some appreciation for the fact that you served in this council role. We will miss you all, and we've given certificates of appreciation to the 3 council members that will be leaving us and being replaced by new council members, but their commitment and dedication and time away from their families and the hard decisions that they've had to make are not any less than anyone else that's been up here. So with that, we wanted to give each of you a certificate of appreciation to Nicole Shook and for your dedication to the city of Johnstown, for your time of service on council.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let's see which one I pull out next. Charlie Campbell. All right.
Even after he asked
you.
you 50 questions tonight, you still give him.
Hey, look at this,
We're gonna take it
dust
back.
collector.
Yeah.
Good point. And John Merriman. And we're not going to give his either.
Yeah.
We're going to give it to Louis.
Yeah.
We're having some fun here at the end, and that's the point. But sometimes there's heavy decisions, and other times we do get to laugh a little bit. And that's part of being in the public sector. It's tough, but it's rewarding at times. So appreciate your time. Hopefully, you guys will continue to engage and be active in the citizens or in the community. The citizens that are engaged with the council. It's always hard to find public audiences and public participation sometimes. So your desire to serve is not without notice, and we're thankful to have you here as residents as well as past council members. So with that, I will shut up and sit down and allow you to close it out if you would like.
All right. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nicole. Whoa.